Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Hi, here we go, back again. More behind the battles of these American Civil Wars. Fresh off the incompetent. I'll just say he was actually pretty competent in his strategy and everything else, but he wasn't competent in his execution.
Right.
He wasn't confident in his execution of his strategy because he was the retreater. Obviously, we're talking about George McClellan, but we're moving on to the other side of the wall, which is appropriate for this guy because we're looking at old Thomas Jackson, a.k.a. Stonewall, who Robert E. Lee's right-hand man. And some say, mainly historians, military historians, regard him as one of the most gifted tactical commanders in United States history.
He was probably the best general in the Civil War.
He also loved to fall asleep with biscuits in his mouth. So
Yes, and not the crackers like the Britons eat. Actual biscuits.
right, biscuits. Yeah, old Stonewall. You know, he played a pivotal role. He was probably the most famous figure of the Civil War up until his death.
The South probably would have had a chance of doing something if he would have survived.
If he would have made it through, they probably would have. Gettysburg might have been different. A whole host of things.
Jeff Stewart wouldn't have died.
Yeah, things probably might have been different here with old Stonewall in the mix.
Sherman wouldn't have done his little march to the sea or anything like that.
Yeah, he could have been one of the best in history. He's still cited, and we'll get to Patton, what we said in, who was it? Was it McClellan's episode or somebody's episode where Patton used to pray to, or it was Robert E. Lee's episode where Patton used to pray to Robert E. Lee and Jackson. We'll hear all about that again coming up. Thomas Jonathan Jackson, who is referred to right now because he doesn't get the name Stonewall until the Civil War. So, and he's got a whole career of 20 years in the Army before that. Old Jackson was a great-grandson of John Jackson, who born about 1715 to around 1719, lived about 1801. And Elizabeth Cummings, also known as Elizabeth Cummings, two different spellings, and Elizabeth Needles.
Oh.
She lived until about 1828. But Johnny boy, he was an Irish Protestant from Coleraine County, Londonderry, Ireland. While living in London, he was convicted of the capital crime of larceny for stealing 170-pound stone, whatever the hell they did back then. The judge at the Old Bailey sentenced him to 7 years penal transportation. Oh, so we got a family of thieves, do we, Stonewall?
Elizabeth, a strong, blonde woman, almost 6 feet tall.
Which is also unheard of.
Right,
then.
and tall. Born in London.
But I wasn't talking about the blonde. I was talking about the
tallness?
6 feet.
Right. The blonde.
Sure, there's many blondes.
She was born in London. Was also convicted of felony larceny in an unrelated case for stealing 19 pieces of silver, jewelry, and fine lace.
Oh, no, and fine lace back in the... Ooh. That day, that's like stealing salt.
She received a similar sentence. They both transported on the merchant ship Litchfield, which departed London in May of 1749 with 150 convicts. John and Elizabeth met on board and were in love by the time the ship arrived at Annapolis, Maryland.
Oh, wow, just mingling with different sexes on the ship and everything, huh?
Right, especially with all kinds of diseases and shit going around. Ugh.
There's a word that's not used a lot these days, convict.
Right, convict, yeah.
Nobody says convict no more.
Although they were sent to different locations in Maryland for their bond service, the couple married in July of 1755.
Damn, they got shipped from London to Maryland?
Yeah.
Maryland was the penal colony?
I guess.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Why are we accepting these people?
Right.
Jeez. The family then migrated west across the Blue Ridge Mountains to settle near Moorefield, Virginia, which is now West Virginia.
Okay.
And that happened in 1758. 12 years later, they moved farther west to the Tigert Valley. They began to acquire large parcels of virgin farming land, virgin, near the present-day town of Buckhannon, which included 3,000 acres in Elizabeth's name.
Oh.
Elizabeth! John and his 2 teenage sons were early recruits for the Revolutionary War. They fought in the Battle of Kings Mountain, October 7th, 1780.
No shit.
John, he finished the war as captain and served as a lieutenant of the Virginia militia after 1787.
All right.
While the men were in the army, Elizabeth converted their home into a haven. She called it Jackson's Fort. Well, they called it Jackson's Fort, whoever they are, for refugees from Indian attacks. So
Nice.
Look at that.
Look at that. Fantastic.
Helping out everybody.
Hell of a time.
Indian attacks in Virginia?
Oh,
I
everywhere.
guess 1700, yeah.
Yeah. John and Elizabeth had 8 children. Their second son, Edward Jackson, born in 1759. And Edward's third son was Jonathan Jackson. Oh, Stonewall's daddy. Jonathan's mother died April 17th, 1796. 3 years later, October 13th, 1799, his father married Elizabeth Weatherholt. He just loved that name, Elizabeth.
Elizabeth. That's a different guy, but...
Then they had 9 more children.
Jeez. Well...
Dude, he had 15 children. Holy shit.
No, that's the son.
Huh?
This is the son
The son of who?
of a John. John and Elizabeth had 8 children. Their second son was Edward, and Edward's third son was Jonathan, Thomas's father. Jonathan...
Right. They're still talking about John.
Jonathan's mother died 3 years later, October.
Right.
His father married Elizabeth, and they had 9 more children. Oh, jeez.
They had 15 kids.
Good Lord. Oh,
my.
How many of those? How many of those survived?
Probably like 6.
Well, there's his ancestry. Meanwhile, the guy we're talking about here in this episode, Stonewall Thomas, he was born in the town of Clarksburg, Harrison County, Virginia, January 21st, 1824.
All right. Raining again.
Is that rain? He was the third child of Julia Beckwith Jackson. She lived from 1798 to 1831. Oh. And Jonathan Jackson, 1790 to 1826. Damn, he lost both of his parents.
Quick.
His daddy was an attorney. Both of Jackson's parents were natives of Virginia. The family already had 2 young children and were living in Clarksburg, in what is now West Virginia, like we said, when Thomas was born. He was named for his maternal grandfather, clearly. There is some dispute, though, about the actual location of Jackson's birth, though.
Historical marker on the flood wall in Parkersburg, West Virginia. This marker claims that he was born in a cabin near this very spot when his mother was visiting her parents who lived there, obviously. There are writings which indicate that in Jackson's early childhood, he was called the Real Macaroni. Though the origin of the nickname and whether it really existed, it's very unclear.
I don't know what that has to do with disputing on his birthplace, but...
Thomas's sister, Elizabeth,
Jeez.
she was 6 years old when she died of typhoid fever.
And damn typhoid, man. Typhoid Mary.
On the 6th of March in 1826. Oh, shit. 3 6s. Damn. With 2-year-old Thomas at her bedside. Oh, why'd you let little 2-year-old see that? His daddy also died of typhoid fever on March 26th. Damn. Just 20 days later. Nope. A year and 20 days later. 1827, March 26th. After nursing his daughter. He
caught it from her.
And he lived a little bit longer.
Wow.
Why would they let the little 2-year-old Thomas sit next to
Right, next to a typhoid. Jeez. Well, Jackson's mother gave birth to his sister Laura Ann the day after Jackson's father died. Julia Jackson thus was widowed at 28 and was left with much debt and 3 young children, including the newborn just born.
Damn. Right.
She sold the family's possessions to pay the debts. She then declined family charity and moved into a small rented 1-room house. Look at you. All my ladies independent, rent a 1-room house. She then took in sewing and opened a private school to support herself and her 3 young children for about 4 years.
Fantastic.
Until
in 1830, Julia Neal Jackson remarried, said, you know what? We need some help. We need a man's help. Against the wishes of her friends.
Because this is a man's world.
Right. She did that against the wishes of her friends.
Like, you can't forsake your husband.
Right.
Like that.
Right. Her new husband, Captain Blake B. Whitson. He was also an attorney. And he did not like the stepchildren.
Well, there you go.
He did not like
Probably why the friends didn't want him to.
Right. He's like, he's a piece of shit.
But he's got money.
Right. Warren, Julia's eldest son, moved to live with his uncle, Alfred Neal, near Parkersburg. And at the age of 16, he was hired to teach in Upshur County.
Teaching at age 16. I mean, that's like, back in those days, it's like 30 something.
Right. Julia moved to Fayette County with their other 2 children, Thomas and Laura.
Yes.
She remained in such poor health, and caring for the children was such a strain on her strength that she agreed to let their grandmother Jackson take them to her home in Lewis County, about 4 miles north of Weston, where she lived with their unmarried daughters and sons.
That would be Stonewall's daddy's mama.
Right.
One of these sons was sent to Fayette County to care for the children by the grandmother. When he arrived and the purpose of his visit was revealed, there was quite a commotion among the children. They were very reluctant to leave their mother.
Oh.
Thomas, now 6 years old, slipped away to the nearby woods where he hid, only returning to the house at night. About a day or two of convincing and numerous bribes, the uncle finally persuaded the children to make the trip. Obviously, it took several days back in those days with the help of their mother.
Right. Wow. When they arrived at their destination, they became the pets of an indulgent grandmother.
Oh, no, a grand smother.
2 maiden aunts and several bachelor uncles. Oh, a bunch of drunks.
Dude.
All of whom were known for their great kindness of heart and strong family attachment. Oh, those are just good old boys, man.
You guys.
Yeah, they helped out on the farm and nice. Good for them, man. It's like the Hatfield McCoys.
I don't know about that, but
Thomas and Laura indulged in every way and to an extent well calculated to spoil them.
they got spoiled.
In August of 1835, Thomas and Laura's grandmother dead.
Oh.
Right, the very following year, after giving birth to Thomas's half brother William, she's still having some kids.
Look, apparently,
Holy shit!
a man's got to get his rocks off.
Stonewall's half brother William Wirt Woodson, Julia, died of complications from birth, leaving her 3 older children orphaned. Julia was buried in an unmarked grave. That's bullshit. In a homemade coffin in Westlake Cemetery along the James River and the Kanawha Turnpike in Fayette County, within the corporate limits of present-day Ansted, West Virginia.
Couldn't even give her a proper burial.
Man, that's bullshit.
Well, while all this is happening, old Stonewall and his sister Laura, they were sent to live with their uncle, Cummins Jackson, who owned a grist mill in Jackson's Mill.
Cool.
Which is near present-day Weston in Lewis County.
Okay.
Their older brother, Warren, he went to live with other relatives on his mother's side of the family. But he later died of tuberculosis in 1841 at the age of 20.
Oh, wow.
Thomas and Laura Ann returned from Jackson's Mill in November 1831 to be at their dying mother's bedside, though.
Jeez, they've seen a lot of death.
Yeah.
It's like the freaking Lincolns.
I mean, everybody in this time.
Right. They spent 4 years together at the mill before being separated. Laura Ann sent to live with the mother's family. Thomas, he was to live with his Aunt Polly, his father's sister, and her husband, Isaac Brake. They lived on a farm 4 miles from Clarksburg. Oh, Thomas was treated by Brake as an outsider, having suffered verbal abuse for over a year. He said, "I'm out." He ran away. When his cousin in Clarksburg urged him to return to Aunt Polly's house, he said, "Maybe I ought to, ma'am, but I'm not going to."
He said, no. He then walked 18 miles through mountain wilderness to Jackson's Mill, where he was welcomed by his uncles, and he remained there for the following 7 years.
Why would you want to leave such a loving family?
Right. I know, right.
There's fucking 15 of those bastards there.
Although they loved him, old Cummins Jackson, he was strict with Thomas, who looked up to Cummins as a school teacher. Jackson helped around the farm, tending sheep with the assistance of a sheepdog, driving teams of oxen, and helping harvest wheat and corn.
Fantastic.
Formal education, though, was not easily obtained, but he attended school when and where he could. Much of Jackson's education, he was self-taught. Self-taught, no lessons.
Ooh. He once made a deal.
With the devil.
Yes. With one of his uncle's slaves to provide him with pine knots in exchange for reading lessons. Thomas would stay up all night reading borrowed books by the light of those burning pine knots.
Yeah, so you didn't have candles, so they had to use those they were candles.
Fantastic. Virginia law forbade teaching a slave, free black, or mulatto,
Which means white,
to
and
read
black.
or write. Nevertheless, Jackson secretly taught this slave, as he had promised he would do. He's a man of his word. Once literate, that slave, he fled to Canada via the Underground Railroad. In his later years at Jackson's Mill, Thomas served as a school teacher.
Good for him. Well, let's take a look before we get into the rest of his upbringing. His family, they might have loved each other, but some stuff was going on during the Civil War. We all know it's been portrayed as brother against brother, but in the case of Jackson family, it was brother against sister. Lord Jackson Arnold was close to her brother Thomas until the Civil War period. As the war loomed, she became a staunch Unionist in a somewhat divided Harrison County.
Wow.
She was so strident in her beliefs that she expressed mixed feelings upon hearing of Thomas's death. She really didn't even care.
Wow.
One Union officer said that she seemed depressed at hearing the news, but her Unionism was stronger than her family bond, said it's for the good of the people. In a letter, he wrote that Laura had said that she would rather know that he was dead than to have him a leader in the rebel army.
Ooh.
Her Union sentiment also estranged her later in life from her husband, Jonathan Arnold, as well.
Wow. I mean, good for her, man. Standing up for your beliefs.
I guess. So that's his family, his sisters, anyways, his siblings.
His only sister that was close. Him and her have been through hell.
Right. Literally. Now, this is where Stonewall is going to make his bones.
Stonewall Jackson is appointed to the United States Military Academy, summer of 1842, at the age of 18.
Of course.
After Cadet Gibson Butcher resigned after one day of service.
So we got a spot open.
Here you go, boy. After petitioning Congressman Samuel Hayes to appoint Jackson as an emergency replacement for Butcher, Jackson reported for duty on the 18th of June, 1842. Because of his inadequate schooling, he had difficulty with the entrance examinations and began his studies at the bottom of his class. I mean,
What are you going to do, man?
Displaying a dog determination. He was a dog. That boy got that dog in him. Displaying a dog determination that was characterized his life, he became one of the hottest working cadets in the academy. And he moved steadily up the academic rankings so fast, so quick. No one's ever seen it before. Considered simply as a plebe during his first semester at West Point, old Thomas Jackson finished his term in January of 1843 and was appointed a cadet fourth class on February 20th, 1843. Look at that guy. Jackson's 1842-1843 fourth class year ended on a high note with the visit of Winfield Scott to West Point in June 1843. Look at that. Old Winfield Scott himself.
Well, the next month, Jackson.
Hero.
Well, the next month, Jackson assumed his duty as a third class cadet and finished his sophomore year without incident in the spring of 1844. Now 20 years old, he was then appointed a second class cadet and granted his first ever summer vacation from West Point.
Oh, damn. They let a 20-year-old boy out on summer, huh?
All right, you remember, I mean, everybody we covered so far went to West Point, but one of them said that the first 2 years they weren't allowed to leave.
Right.
So, yeah, now he's 20, going on his first ever summer vacation, and he returned from that vacation August 28th, 1844. For the next school year, he was appointed a cadet sergeant,
Nice.
the only leadership position he would hold in the Corps. When his junior year ended in the spring of 1845, Jackson was advanced to cadet first class, but not granted a senior leadership position.
He was thus referred to as a cadet high private. Jackson graduated 17th out of... Oh, wow.
Hey, dude, after starting at the very bottom of his class when he first came in, you can't hate on that.
17th out of 59 in class of 1846. The academy at the time had no graduation ceremonies or formal presentation of diplomas. Why? With Jackson departing on July 1st, 1846 as a brevet second lieutenant, General Daniel Harvey Hill later remembered that Jackson's peers at West Point had said of Jackson, if the course had been 1 year longer, he would have graduated at the head of his class.
Well, guess what? It wasn't, and he graduated 17th.
Right, but he did that in 4 years.
Your regular time.
Pretty damn good. Yeah, but from
59 to 17, I mean, it's not bad, right? Can't hate him. Well, then obviously, just like all the rest of the generals we covered so far, guess what's next?
Ooh.
The old Mexican War. Like we said, he graduated West Point, and then that same year that he graduated, the Mexican-American War began.
I'm sure it did. Of course it did.
The commander of this army at this time, Winfield Scott, he made it clear in his early campaign planning that he wanted leadership of his invasion army to comprise regular army officers with a minimal use of militia.
Right, you don't want militia.
Scott said these guys are undertrained.
Right.
Jackson was issued official military orders July 22nd, 1846.
Oh, man.
Which assigned him to Company K of the 1st U.S. Artillery, which was presently headquartered at Fort Columbus in New York.
2 weeks later, Jackson arrived at Fort Columbus. He found that his company had already deployed to Mexico.
Wow, communication errors.
Wow. Jackson's new commanding officer, Francis Taylor, had remained behind. He then detailed the young second lieutenant to recruiting duty to collect new recruits and horses for a future deployment to Texas. He's like, oh, don't worry about it. You ain't getting out of this.
Why is the commanding officer of these guys that are already on their way to Mexico still in New York?
Right. Jackson, he was deployed on August 19th. And it took until October 5th for himself and the new members of Company K to even reach Camargo in Mexico.
Well, by November 24th, the entire Company K had assembled in Monterey. November 29th, the first official combat campaign began, in which Jackson was a participant.
All right.
This was the attack against Saltillo, although by the time the American forces arrived, the town was found to be deserted.
I mean, come on, it takes 17 months.
All right.
Jeez.
1847 brought hopes of an amphibious campaign.
Oh.
And by March 5th, Company K had been relocated off the shores of Veracruz. Here, This is where Jackson's true war record begins, as he participated in the siege of Veracruz, followed by combat at the Battle of Cerro Gordo. April 1847, he was informed that his brevet rank of second lieutenant was now being made permanent in the United States Army.
Look at this guy. Good for you, man. Good for you, bud.
Good for you, buddy.
Jackson, he was transferred to Company G of the 1st Artillery.
EMG.
But Captain Taylor delayed the actual move until May of 1847.
Okay.
Jackson then assumed duties under Captain John H. Winder, with the American forces next ordered to move against Perot, Veracruz. Jackson's new company, however, was ordered to a garrison duty in the town of Zalpa. Well, that's pretty bullshit. It's like, what the hell?
Zalapa.
There, Jackson would remain until June 18th, 1847, when Company G was ordered forward into action, finally. But although in reality, this entailed simply further garrison duty in the city of Puebla.
Hey, man. You gotta crawl before you walk.
You're still alive, bud.
All right. July 13th, Jackson again transferred, this time to Company I of the 1st Artillery, with the unit ordered into action August 7th.
All right.
The Battle of Contreras followed, accompanied by an assault on Molino del Rey. Jackson's combat participation then continued in the Battle of Chapultepec, with a culmination in September 1847 when Jackson participated in the Battle for Mexico City. August 20th, 1847, he then been promoted to first lieutenant with recommendations made for brevet promotions to both captain and major. This dude's making a name for himself, isn't he? Look at him.
Fantastic. During the Battle of Chapultepec on 13th of September 1847, he refused what he felt was a bad order to withdraw his troops. He's like, no. Confronted by his supervisor, he explained his rationale, claiming withdrawal was more hazardous than continuing his overmatched artillery duel. His judgment proved correct, and the relieving brigade was able to exploit the advantage Jackson had broached.
Look at that.
In contrast to this display of strength of character, he obeyed what he also felt was a bad order when he raked a civilian throng with artillery fire after the Mexican authorities.
That's how they say it in Mexico. They're Mexican authorities.
After the Mexican authorities failed to surrender Mexico City at the hour demanded by the United States forces.
Oh, so they were like, if not, then you bombard the city. It doesn't matter who's there.
The former episode and the later aggressive action against the retreating Mexican army earned him field promotion to the brevet rank of major.
Major Jackson.
Oh, man.
Well, he had also been made the acting company commander of Company I, but was replaced by William French, December 4th, 1847.
You bastards.
A little more than a month later, January 19th, Jackson transferred back to his original company, Company K, and served as a company officer until the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which happened in March. July 5th, Company K then ordered to depart to Mexico, and by July 20th, the unit was in New Orleans.
Oh, back home.
Throwing beads.
Yeah, First Lieutenant Jackson's activities immediately following the Mexican War consisted mainly of administrative tasks, accompanied by some free time in which Jackson engaged in some furloughs, both to Virginia and Niagara Falls.
All right. Must have been a treat to see a Niagara Falls. Well, back then especially.
Oh, great. Between the summer of
you don't even know what it looks like. Like, we can look at pictures and be like, oh, I don't never have to visit there. But this guy just heard of things.
Drawings and shit.
Maybe.
Between the summer of 1848 and the start of 1849, Jackson was detailed to various forts, including Fort Columbus, Fort Hamilton, as well as a detail to serve on a court-martial at Carlisle Barracks in Pennsylvania. With his primary posting at Fort Hamilton, Jackson performed duties as acting company commander, post adjutant, as well as the company quartermaster.
By February of 1849, Jackson had heard nothing about his brevet promotions from the Mexican War, and he was still merely a first lieutenant. News came in the last days of February that Jackson had been indeed promoted to brevet captain with a date of rank from August 20th, 1847.
Nice.
To get back pay?
Yeah.
Just 2 days later, Jackson learned of his promotion to brevet major with a date rank of September 13th, 1847.
These bastards, almost a year later.
Oh. As a brevet major, Jackson...
2 years later. Holy
right.
shit.
As brevet major, Jackson next looked forward to what future assignments the United States Army had to offer. Well, this path led Jackson to the state of Florida, where at this time events would transpire to eventually persuade Jackson to resign from the U.S. Army. This is way before the Civil War, though.
Right. What happened? He didn't like the way they were treating the Seminoles.
Actually, it had something to do with the Seminoles, yes.
We're about to find out. Take a look at his time in Florida and his resignation. Following the Mexican War, Jackson was assigned to a garrison post in Florida. He quickly became enemies with his commanding officer, Major William H. French. He filed numerous complaints with the regional commander, Major General David Twiggs. Jackson's Army career thereafter took a sharp downward turn. He resigned from the military in 1851 in order to pursue a career as a military instructor at the Virginia Military Institute.
The old VMI.
In many ways, Jackson is in fact behaved as if he had never left the Army while at VMI, as he routinely wore a uniform and was addressed by faculty and students as Major Jackson. I mean, why wouldn't you?
I mean, you're still in a military institute, but
Right.
I don't even know how he got in there if he left the Army.
Right.
After he went to the VMI, he became professor of natural and experimental philosophy, or physics, and an instructor of artillery. Jackson, he was disliked as a teacher, though, with his students nicknaming him Tom Fool, believing that Jackson could never be anything more than a martinet colonel, half soldier and half preacher. So, yeah, he does more preaching than he does fighting.
All right.
He memorized his lectures and then recited them to the class.
Which is perfect.
Students who came to ask for help were given the same explanation as before. If a student asked for help a second time, Jackson simply repeated the explanation slower and more deliberately, like they're talking to. I get it.
While an instructor at VMI in 1853, Jackson married Eleanor Junkin. He called her Ellie, my Ellie. Her daddy, George Junkin, was president of the Washington College, later named Washington Lee University.
Oh, look at all the connections.
Wow. And an addition was built onto the president's residence for the Jacksons to live. Oh,
Damn, they built the whole.
right.
I mean, she was the daughter.
Right. There's a little baby girl. Little sweetheart. And when Robert E. Lee became president of Washington College, he lived in that very same house.
How nice.
Now known as, you guessed it, the Lee Jackson House.
Things aren't looking good for. Don't love anybody, Stonewall, because it's not going to work out for you.
Well, Eleanor gave birth to a stillborn son on the 22nd of October, 1854. Experiencing a hemorrhage an hour later, she also died.
Damn. After a tour of Europe, Jackson married again, 1857. Mary Anna Morrison. That's who he married. She was from North Carolina, where her father was the first president of Davidson College. Her sister, Isabella, was married to Daniel Harvey Hill. He is a Confederate general who commanded, D.H. Hill, yeah.
Yeah, man.
Mary, she had a daughter named Mary Graham, April 30th, 1858, but the baby died less than a month later.
Are you serious?
Another daughter, born in 1862, shortly before Jackson's death, they named her Julia Laura, after his mother and sister.
Oh, even though his sister hates him?
Right.
Well, not yet.
Well, it's 1862, I would imagine.
Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah, she hates him.
Jackson, he then purchased the only house he ever owned while in Lexington. Built in 1801, the brick townhouse at 8 East Washington Street, purchased by the Jackson family in 1859. He lived in it for 2 years before being called to serve in the Confederacy. And guess what? He never again returned home.
In November of 1859, at the request of the governor of Virginia, Major William Gillum led a contingent of VMI cadet corps to Charleston to provide an additional military presence at the hanging of militant abolitionist John Brown on the 2nd of December, following his raid on the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry on the 16th of October. Major Jackson, he was placed in command of the artillery, consisting of 2 howitzers, manned by 21 cadets.
Hey, look at that. So Lee went there.
Fantastic.
Stonewall went there. All right, and as a little prelude to his Civil War time, we're going to take a look at his views on slavery before we get to the war. He was not known to the white inhabitants of Lexington, instead mostly being known by many of the African Americans in town, who were both slaves and free black. In 1855, he organized Sunday school classes for blacks at the Presbyterian Church. His second wife, Mary, she taught with Jackson, as he preferred that my labor should be given to the colored children, believing that it was more important and useful to put the strong hand of the gospel under the ignorant African race to lift them up. I mean, you got good intentions, but when you talk like that...
The pastor, Dr. William Spotswood White, described the relationship between Jackson and the Sunday afternoon students. He said, in their religious instruction, he succeeded wonderfully. His discipline was systematic and firm, but very kind. His servants reverenced and loved him, as they would have done a brother or father. He was emphatically the black man's friend. He addressed his students by name, and they referred to him as Mars Major.
Mars is affectionate as... They referred to Lee as a Mars, that his soldiers did, too.
Right.
Jackson, he owned 6 slaves in the late 1850s, though. 3 were named Hetty, Cyrus, and George, who were a mother and 2 teenage sons. They were received as part of the dowry at his marriage to Mariana Jackson.
Right.
I mean, instead of an envelope of money, you get 3 slaves. Another slave, Albert, requested that Jackson purchase him and allow him to work for his freedom. He was employed as a waiter in one of the Lexington hotels, and Jackson rented him to VMI. Amy also requested that Jackson purchase her from a public slave auction, and she served the family as a cook and housekeeper. So he must be a pretty good guy if people are like, hey, buy me.
Right. The 6th, which was Emma, was a 4-year-old orphan with a learning disability, accepted by Jackson from an aged widow and presented to his second wife, Mariana, as a welcome home gift. What the fuck?
Let's imagine, dude, instead of like flowers or a new frying pan, there's a fucking 4-year-old. Jeez.
Wow.
Life was different.
Needs a little work, but you can get her up and going.
We're short up.
Short up. Wow.
That's crazy.
After Stonewall was shot at Chancellorsville, a slave named Jim Lewis had stayed with Jackson in the small house as he lay dying. Mariana Jackson, 1895 memoir. She said, "Our servants, without the firm guidance and restraint of their master, the excitement of the times proved so demoralizing to them that he deemed it best for me to provide them with good homes among the permanent residents."
Historian James Robertson wrote that about Jackson's view on slavery. He says Jackson neither apologized for nor spoke in favor of the practice of slavery.
Right.
He probably opposed the institution. Well, you don't know that. Yet in his mind, the Creator had sanctioned slavery, and man had no more right to challenge his existence. The good Christian slaveholder was one who treated his servants fairly and humanely at all times. April 1861, after Virginia seceded and the war broke out, he was then ordered by the governor of Virginia to report with the VMI Cadet Corps to Richmond and await further orders. Upon arrival, Jackson was appointed a major of engineers in the Provisional Army of Virginia, which was a short-lived farce and a force, commanded by Robert E. Lee, prior to Virginia fully augmenting into the Confederacy. After Jackson protested such a low rank, the Virginia governor appointed him colonel of the Virginia Infantry, which in May 1861 was augmented to the colonel in the Confederate Army.
Jackson then became a drill master for some of the many new recruits in the Confederate Army. 27th April 1861, Virginia Governor John Lecker ordered Colonel Jackson to take command at Harper's Ferry, where he would assemble and command the unit, which later gained fame as the Stonewall Brigade, consisting of the 2nd, 4th, 5th, 27th, and 33rd Virginia Infantry. These units were from the Shenandoah Valley region of Virginia, where Jackson located his headquarters throughout the first 2 years of the war.
Well, throughout his only time in the war.
Right, as well as counties in Western Virginia as well.
Well, Jackson became known for his relentless drilling of his troops. He believed discipline was vital to success on the battlefield. Following his raids on the B&O Railroad May 24th, he was promoted to brigadier general on June 17th, 1861. He then continued to wear a blue Union Army uniform up to this point, having only access to his old VMI major's jacket, and would not be issued with the gray Confederate uniform until 1862. So this dude wore blue the whole time.
Wow. Let's take a look at the first battle of Bull Run, which got the old Confederates yippity thinking they're going to win the war. They're like, oh, this is easy. Jackson rose to prominence and earned his most famous nickname at the first Battle of Bull Run, and the North called it the First Manassas. No,
the South.
South called it Manassas, North called it Bull Run. That happened on 21st of July in 1861. As the old Rebs began to crumble under heavy Union assault, Jackson's brigade provided crucial reinforcements on Henry House Hill, which we did.
Battle of Bull Run, yes, we did.
Demonstrating the discipline he instilled in his men. While under heavy fire for several continuous hours, Jackson received a wound, breaking the middle finger out of his left hand, about midway between the hand and knuckle.
Oh, that's a shitty-ass place to break.
You ain't kidding.
That's like breaking your femur on your leg.
The bullet passed on the side next to the index finger. Oh, shit.
Him?
It could have took his whole freaking fingers off.
Well, it's a prelude to because he's going to lose his arm soon.
Right.
So. The troops of South Carolina, commanded by General Barnard Elliott B. Jr., they had been overwhelmed, and he rode up to Jackson in despair, exclaiming, "They are beating us back." "Then," said Jackson, "we will give them the bayonet."
Oh.
As he rode back to his command, B exhorted his own troops to reform by shouting, There's Jackson standing like a stone wall. Let us determine to die here, and we will conquer. Rally behind the Virginians. There's some controversy over B's statement and intent, which could not be clarified because he was killed almost immediately after speaking, and none of his subordinate officers wrote reports of the battle.
Major Burnett Rhett, Chief of Staff to General Joseph Johnston, claimed that B was angry at Jackson's failure to come immediately to the relief of B's and Francis Bartow's brigades while they were under heavy pressure.
Hence, standing like a stone wall, doing nothing.
Right. Those who subscribed to his opinion believed that B's statement was meant to be a pejorative. Look at Jackson, standing there like a stone wall.
Not doing shit.
Regardless,
trying shit won't work.
Regardless of the controversy and the delay in relieving B, Jackson's brigade, which would thenceforth be known as the Stonewall Brigade, stopped the old Union assault and suffered more casualties than any other Southern brigade that day. Old Stonewall has since been generally known as Stonewall Jackson. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. During that battle, Jackson displayed a gesture common to him and held his left arm skyward with the palm facing forward, interpreted by his soldiers variously as an eccentricity or an entreaty to God for success in combat. You know, like the televangelists do.
Crazy.
His hand was struck by a bullet or a piece of shrapnel, and he suffered, he then refused medical advice to have the finger amputated. After the battle, Jackson promoted to Major General October 7th, 1861, and given command of the whole Valley District with headquarters in Winchester.
Take a look at the old Valley campaign. Spring of 1862. Union Major General George McClellan's Army of the Potomac approached Richmond from the southeast in the Peninsula Campaign. Major General Irvin McDowell's large corps was poised to hit Richmond from the north. Major General Nathaniel Banks, his army threatened the Shenandoah Valley. Well, Stonewall, he was ordered by Richmond to operate in the valley to defeat Banks' threat and to prevent McDowell's troops from reinforcing McClellan. That's quite a feat there. Jackson possessed the attributes to succeed against his poorly coordinated and sometimes timid opponents. A combination of great audacity, excellent knowledge, and shrewd use of the terrain, and an uncommon ability to inspire his troops to great feats of marching and fighting.
Well, the campaign started with a tactical defeat at Kernstown, March 23rd, 1862. That was when faulty intelligence led him to believe he was attacking a small detachment. Oh, I didn't know him and McClellan hung out.
Oh, right.
Well, except for he thinks he's doing a big detachment. Right. But it became a strategic victory for the Confederacy because his aggressiveness suggested he possessed a much larger force, convincing he owed Abe to keep Banks' troop in the valley and McDowell's 30,000-man corps near Fredericksburg. That subtracted about 50,000 soldiers from McClellan's invasion force. Well, as it transpired, it was Jackson's only defeat in the valley, ever. Yeah, he should have been nicknamed Shenandoah Jackson or something, because that dude owned that damn thing.
Did. By adding Major General Richard Ewell's large division and Major General Edward Johnson, they call him Allegheny, his small division, Jackson increased his army to 17,000 men. He was still significantly outnumbered, but attacked portions of his divided enemy individually at McDowell, defeating both Brigadier Generals Robert Milroy and Robert Schenck. He defeated Banks at Front Royal and Winchester, ejecting him from that valley. Lincoln, he decided that the defeat of Jackson was an immediate priority, though Jackson's orders were solely to keep Union forces occupied and away from Richmond. He ordered Irvin McDowell to send 20,000 men to Front Royal and Major General John Fremont to move to Harrisonburg. Lincoln's like, let's get the shit done, boys.
Well, his logic is if both forces could converge at Strasburg, Jackson's only escape route up the valley would be cut. After a series of maneuvers, Jackson defeated Fremont's command at Cross Keys and Brigadier General James Shields at Port Republic on 8th and 9th of June. Union forces then withdrawn from the valley.
Wow.
It was a classic military campaign of surprise and maneuver.
Right.
Jackson pressed his army to travel 646 miles in 48 days of marching.
Damn.
And he won 5 significant victories with just a force of 17,000 against at least 60,000 Union. Sam Hill. Stonewall Jackson's reputation for moving his troops so rapidly, earned them the oxymoronic nickname Foot Cavalry.
Oh.
Right. They're moving as if they're on horseback.
Right.
He became the most celebrated soldier in the Confederacy until he obviously eclipsed by Lee, only because he died.
Right.
And he lifted the morale of the Southern public.
Damn right he did. Take a look at the old Peninsula campaign. Oh, McClellan Peninsula Campaign toward Richmond stalled at the Battle of Seven Pines on the 31st of May and the 1st of June. After the Valley Campaign ended in mid-June, Jackson and his troops, they were called to join Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia.
And that's exactly why Lincoln said Stonewall is a priority.
Yeah. By using a railroad tunnel under the Blue Ridge Mountains and then transporting troops to Hanover County on the Virginia Central Railroad, Stonewall and his forces made a surprise appearance in front of McClellan and Mechanicsville. McClellan's like, holy shit!
That's a bold move, because imagine if they found out you were in the tunnel and you got no way out. Wow. Well, reports had last placed Jackson's forces in the Shenandoah Valley, so they're not even thinking about it anyway. Their presence near Richmond added greatly to the Union commander's overestimation of the strength and numbers of the forces before him. This proved a crucial factor in McClellan's decision to reestablish his base at a point many miles downstream from Richmond on the James River. That happened at Harrison's Landing, and essentially a retreat that ended the Peninsula Campaign and prolonged the war almost 3 more years. Because if you listened to our McClellan episode last week,
the war should have been over with.
You would have known that he had plenty of chances to end.
The war would
at least Lee's army.
Right. War would have been done with in the summer of 1862.
Should have been.
We wouldn't even had to mess with Gettysburg or Vicksburg or anything like that. Jackson's troops served well under Lee in the series of battles known as the 7 Days Battles. But Jackson's own performance in those battles is generally considered to be poor.
Yeah, didn't he fall asleep and with a biscuit in his mouth? Right. And that's that whole episode.
He arrived late at Mechanicsville, inexplicably ordered his men to settle down for the night within clear earshot of the battle. Oh, wow. He was late at Savage's Station. At White Oak Swamp, he failed to employ fording places to cross White Oak Swamp Creek, attempting for hours to rebuild a bridge instead, which limited his involvement to an ineffectual artillery duel, and a missed opportunity to intervene decisively at the Battle of Glendale, which was raging nearby.
He's very nonchalant about things.
Right. It's just, we'll get there when we do.
Right. At Malvern Hill, Jackson participated in the futile, piecemeal frontal assaults against entrenched Union infantry and massed artillery, and he suffered heavy casualties. But this was a problem for all of Lee's army in the ill-considered battle. Yeah, I think we just put out...
Malvern, yeah, not too long ago.
Well, we did that. It was a while back, obviously, but I just put out a clip of just that battle on YouTube a couple weeks ago. Maybe like a week ago, but it's like a disaster for the
disaster.
I don't know, it was a disaster for the Union.
Both.
Yeah, a wasted opportunity for the Union because they should have destroyed the Confederates right here. This is where it should have been over with, but Malvern Hill, dude. Well, the reasons for Jackson's sluggish and poorly coordinated actions during the day's battles are disputed, although a severe lack of sleep after the grueling march and railroad trip from the Shenandoah Valley was probably a significant factor.
I'll say.
Both Jackson and his troops were completely exhausted. An explanation for this and other lapses by Jackson was tersely offered by his colleague and brother-in-law, General Daniel Harvey Hill. He says, Jackson's genius never shone when he was under the command of another. So he was whatever, they got it, they're in command. Right. That's pretty shitty, actually.
All right. Take a look at this Battle of Second Bull Run, and then moving on to Fredericksburg after that. Military reputations of Lee's corps commanders are often characterized as Stonewall Jackson, representing the audacious offensive component of Lee's army, whereas his counterpart, James Longstreet, more typically advocated and executed defensive strategies and tactics. Jackson has been described as the Army's hammer, and Longstreet as its anvil. Nice. In the Northern Virginia Campaign, 1862 of August, this stereotype did not hold true. Longstreet commanded the right wing, which has later become known as the First Corps, and Jackson commanded the left wing.
Jackson started the campaign under Lee's orders with a sweeping flanking maneuver that placed his troops into the rear of the Union Major General John Pope's Army of Virginia. Well, the Hotchkiss Journal, which are a collection of Civil War journals, diaries, and personal accounts, it shows that Jackson most likely originally conceived this movement. In the journal entries for March 4th and 6th, 1863, General Stuart tells Hotchkiss that Jackson was entitled to all the credit for the movement, and that Lee thought the proposed movement was very hazardous and reluctantly consented to the movement.
At Manassas Junction, Jackson was able to capture all the supplies of the Union Army depot. Then he had his troops destroy all of it, for it was the main depot for the Union Army. Jackson then retreated, and then took up a defense position and effectively invited Pope to assault him. He's like, come on, motherfucker. On August 28th, 29th, the start of the Second Battle of Bull Run happened. Old Pope from the Union launched repeated assaults against Jackson as Longstreet and the remainder of the army marched north to reach the battlefield.
Yeah, well, Jackson's on the defensive now. August 30th, Pope came to believe that Jackson was starting to retreat. Longstreet took advantage of this, and he launched a massive assault on the Union Army's left.
Damn.
And he had over 25,000 men to do that. Although the Union troops put up a furious defense, Pope's army was forced to retreat in a manner similar, almost exactly what they had suffered at the first Bull Run.
Right, yeah, that's pretty much.
Which was fought on roughly the same battleground as well. When Lee decided to invade the North in the Maryland campaign, Jackson, he took Harper's Ferry, then hastened to join the rest of the army at Sharpsburg, Maryland, where they fought McClellan in the old bloody Battle of Antietam.
Sharpsburg. Antietam was primarily a defensive battle against superior odds, although McClellan failed to exploit his advantage once again.
What, are we doing a McClellan episode? Because it feels all too familiar.
McClellan, we should attack. Are you kidding? They have 150,000 men over there.
Sources say they got 1.8 million waiting in the brushes.
Holy shit.
Guy.
Jackson's men bore the brunt of the initial attacks on the northern end of the battlefield, and at the end of the day, successfully resisted a breakthrough on the southern end when Jackson's subordinate, Major General A.P. Hill, arrived at the last minute from Harper's Ferry. The old Rebs held their position, but the battle was extremely bloody for both sides. And Lee, he's like, yo, we're done. I'm gonna withdraw my army of Northern Virginia. I'm going to go back across the Potomac, and I'm going to end this invasion right now.
Yeah.
Technically a stalemate, but technically a Union victory, technically a Confederate victory. So it could have been all three.
Well, it's definitely more important for the Union.
Right.
October 10th, Jackson, he's promoted to lieutenant general, being ranked just behind Lee and Longstreet, and his command was redesignated the Second Corps.
He's never going to pass Longstreet. That's Lee's buddy.
Well,
That's Lee's little buddy.
not the way Lee reacted after Jackson died.
Right.
So what if Jackson? Well, we'll get to it. Before the armies camped for the winter, Jackson's Second Corps held off a strong Union assault against the right flank of the Confederate line at the Battle of Fredericksburg, and what became a Confederate victory. Just before the battle, Jackson was delighted to receive a letter about the birth of his daughter, Julia Laura Jackson, November 23rd.
Never got to see
And he will never see her.
Never got to see his little daughter. Also before the battle, Major General Jeb Stuart of his little cavalry guys running around. Lee's dashing and well-dressed.
Lee, where are you?
This is General Lee's dashing and well-dressed cavalry commander. He presented to Jackson a fine general's frock coat that he had ordered from one of the best traders in town. One of the best tailors in Richmond.
How nice, a little jab.
Jackson's previous coat was threadbare, colorless from exposure to the elements. Its buttons removed by admiring ladies.
Yeah, marching down, there's pulling shit off of them.
Jackson asked his staff to thank Stuart, saying that although the coat was too handsome for him, he would cherish it as a souvenir.
But Tony, what about the jacket?
Right.
Where's the jacket, Tony?
He ain't gonna wear the damn thing. His staff insisted that he'd wear it to dinner, which caused scores of soldiers to rush to see him in an uncharacteristic
He
garb.
probably felt like such a moron, dude.
Jackson was so embarrassed with the attention that he did not wear the new uniform for months.
At least throw it in some dirt and roll around and get it dirty or something. Shit.
He's like, what the hell is this?
Well, unfortunately, all good stories must come to an end, because this leads us to Chancellorsville,
Son of a bitch.
which the Army of Northern Virginia faced a serious threat by the Army of the Potomac, led by its new commanding general, Major General Joseph Hooker.
Yeah, Hooker came in and did some shit.
Did he, though? Did the same shit.
Right.
Lee decided to employ a risky tactic to take the initiative and offensive away from Hooker's new southern thrust. He decided to divide his forces. Yeah, that was risky. Jackson and his entire corps went on an aggressive flanking maneuver to the right of the Union lines, while riding with his infantry in a wide berth well south and west of the Federal line of battle. Jackson, he employed Major General Fitzhugh Lee's cavalry to provide for better reconnaissance regarding the exact location of the Union right and rear.
Right. The results were far better than even Jackson could have hoped. Fitzhugh Lee found the entire right side of the Federal lines in the middle of an open field.
That's where you do not want to fight the Confederates.
Guarded merely by two guns that faced westward.
That's what Grant wanted to fight the Confederates. He wanted to get him in open field.
Right, because they had outgunned them. They outgunned them. guarded merely by 2 guns that faced westward, as well as the supplies and rear encampments. The men were eating and playing games in carefree fashion, completely unaware that an entire Confederate corps was less than a mile away watching them in the woods. Damn.
And then they just sneak out of the woods and just annihilate everybody, dude. Well, what happened next is given in Fitzhugh Lee's own words. So impressed was I with my discovery that I rode rapidly back to the point on the plank road where I had left my cavalry. Cavalry. I've been trying to pronounce that.
Cavalry.
Where I had left my cavalry. Cavalry.
Nope.
Cavalry.
Still got the L in there.
Cavalry, right?
Cavalry.
Cavalry. Cavalry. Cavalry. Cavalry.
Cavalry.
Cavalry. Yeah, but you say Calvary when you say it fast. It's cavalry. Cavalry. So impressed was I with my discovery that I rode rapidly back to the point on the plank road where I had left my cavalry. And back down the road Jackson was moving until I met Stonewall himself. General, said I, if you will ride with me, halt in your column here, out of sight, I will show you the enemy's right, and will perceive the great advantage of attacking down the old turnpike instead of the plank road, the enemy's lines being taken in reverse. Bring only one courier, as you will be in view from the top of the hill. Jackson assented, and I rapidly conducted him to the point of observation. There had been no change in the picture. I only knew Jackson slightly. I watched him closely as he gazed upon Howard's troops. This was then about 2 p.m. His eyes burned with a brilliant glow, lighting up a sad face. He's like, murder!
Yes.
His expression was one of intense interest. His face was colored slightly with the paint of approaching battle and radiant at the success of his flank movement. To the remarks made to him while the unconscious line of blue was pointed out, he did not reply once during the 5 minutes he was on the hill, and yet his lips were moving. This is going to go over there, we're going to go over there. Oh, yeah. From what I have read and heard of Jackson since that day, I know now what he was doing then. Oh, beware of rashness, General Hooker. Stonewall Jackson is praying in full view and in rear of your right flank.
Oh.
While talking to the great god of battles, how could he hear what a poor cavalryman was saying?
All right.
Tell General Rhodes, said he, suddenly whirling his horse towards the courier, to move across the old plank road, halt when he gets to the old turnpike, and I will join him there. One more look upon the Federal lines, and then he rode rapidly down the hill, his arms flapping to the motion of his horse, over whose head, it seemed, good rider as he was, he would certainly go. And he's just bouncing.
Right. He don't care.
He's like, yeah. I expected to be told I had made a valuable personal reconnaissance, saving the lives of many soldiers, and that Jackson was indebted to me to that amount at least. Perhaps I might have been a little chagrined at Jackson's silence, and hence commented inwardly and adversely upon his horsemanship. At last, I had looked upon him for the last time. Last time he saw him. And that's Fitzhugh Lee in his address to the Association of the Army of Northern Virginia, 1879.
Jackson immediately returned to his corps and arranged his divisions into a line of battle to charge directly into the oblivious Federal right. The old Rebs marched silently until they were merely several hundred feet from the Union position. They released a cry, and a full charge ensued.
And that's what you heard. If you watch any documentary on this,
It's insane.
And they just come out of the woods out of nowhere, dude.
Many of the Federal soldiers were captured without a shot fired. The rest were driven into a full rout. Jackson pursued back toward the center of the Federal line until dusk.
As Jackson and his staff were returning to camp May 2nd, sentries of the 18th North Carolina Infantry Regiment, they mistook the group for a Union cavalry force. The sentries shouted, "Halt! Who goes there?" They really said that, huh? But fired before evaluating the reply. Frantic shouts by Johnson's staff identifying the party were replied to by Major John D. Berry with the retort, "It's a damned Yankee trick! Fire!" A second volley was fired in response. Jackson, he was hit by 3 bullets. 2 in the left arm, 1 in the right hand. It's crazy. He didn't even die from his freaking gun wounds, dude.
It's insane. Several of Jackson's men and many horses were killed in this attack. Incoming artillery rounds and darkness led to confusion. Jackson was dropped from his stretcher while being evacuated.
Why is he on a stretcher when he's got shot in the hands and the arms?
Surgeon Hunter McGuire amputated Jackson's left arm, and Jackson was moved to Fairfield Plantation at Guinea Station.
Oh.
Thomas Chandler, the owner, offered the use of his home for Jackson's treatment, but Jackson suggested using Chandler's plantation office building instead.
We don't want to muck up your home.
Right.
Confederate General Robert E. Lee, he wrote Jackson after learning of his injuries, stating, "Could I have directed events, I would have chosen for the good of the country to be disabled in your stead." Jackson died of complications from pneumonia May 10th, 1863,
Jeez.
8 days after he was shot. Dr. McGuire, he wrote an account of Jackson's final hours and last words. He says a few moments before he died, he cried out in his delirium, "Order A.P. Hill to prepare for action. Pass the infantry to the front rapidly. Tell Major Hawks," then stopped, leaving the sentence unfinished. Presently, a smile of ineffable sweetness spread itself over his pale face, and he said quietly, and with an expression as if of relief, "Let us cross over the river and rest under the shade of the trees." Give me a biscuit.
Damn, that's insane. I mean, it happens. It happens.
Yes, it does.
Jackson's fatal bullet was withdrawn, examined, and found to be a .67 caliber, which was .67 inches round. That's pretty big. A type in service with the Confederate forces. Union troops in the area were using .58 caliber balls. This was one of the first instances of forensic ballistics identification derived from a firearm projectile.
Well, look at that. There's a fun fact for you guys.
Yeah. His body was moved to the governor's mansion in Richmond for the public to mourn. He was then moved to be buried in Oak Grove Cemetery in Lexington, Virginia. The arm that was amputated on the 2nd of May was buried separately by Jackson's chaplain, Beverly Tucker Lacey, at the J. Horace Lacey House, Elwood they called it, which is now preserved at the Fredericksburg National Battlefield in the wilderness of Orange County near the Field Hospital.
And Jackson's body was buried in ordinary dress, but wearing a military coat. His coffin was draped with a Confederate flag and had a glass plate so that his face could be seen during public mourning. Yeah, they liked to do that back in the day. That's
weird.
His funeral proceeded with great pomp. All pallbearers were generals, including James Longstreet. 4 white horses pulled the hearse, and a crowd 2 miles long followed the procession. In the course of public mourning, 20,000 people visited the body.
Damn. Upon hearing of Jackson's death, Robert E. Lee, he mourned the loss of both a friend and a trusted commander. As Jackson lay dying, Lee sent a message through Chaplain Lacey saying, "Give General Jackson my affectionate regards, and say to him, he has lost his left arm, but I my right." Oh, good for you, Lee. The night Lee learned of Jackson's death, he told his cook, "William, I have lost my right arm. I'm bleeding at the heart."
Oh.
Harper's Weekly reported Jackson's death on the 23rd of May, 1863, and this is what it says. Death of Stonewall Jackson. General Stonewall Jackson was badly wounded in the arm at the Battle of Chancellorsville and had his arm amputated. Jackson initially appeared to be healing, but died from pneumonia on the 10th of May, 1863.
Let's take a look at a little bit of his personal life here.
We just go through his personal life?
I don't know. We went to his military life. Jackson's sometimes unusual command style and personality traits, combined with his frequent success in battle, contributed to his legacy as one of the greatest generals of the Civil War. Mm-hmm. He was martial and stern in attitude and profoundly religious. He was a deacon in the Presbyterian Church as well.
Oh, wow.
One of his many nicknames was Old Blue Lights.
Oh.
The term applied to a military man whose evangelical zeal burned with the intensity of the blue light used for nighttime display.
Oh, he also has some physical ailments, as pretty much everybody did back then.
Right.
Jackson, he had a lifelong belief that one of his arms was longer than the other. We don't worry about that. And thus, and thus usually held the longer arm up to equalize his circulation. He was described as a champion sleeper.
Yeah.
And occasionally even fell asleep with food in his mouth.
Yeah. Biscuits.
Jackson suffered a number of ailments for which he sought relief via the contemporary practices of his day, including hydrotherapy, popular in America at that time. He visited establishments at Oswego, New York, in 1850, and Round Hill, Massachusetts, in 1860, although with little evidence of success.
What would that be, like hot springs or
I think so.
hot tubs and shit?
Yeah.
Nowadays, that you call it? Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
With the fucking jets on.
Right.
Painful for, I'm sure jets,
It helped.
if they're powerful enough, it would massage your muscles at the very least.
At least. Jackson also suffered a significant hearing loss in both of his ears as a result of his prior service in the United States Army as an artillery officer. That would do it. They didn't have earplugs back then.
A recurrent story concerns Jackson's love of lemons, which he allegedly gnawed whole to alleviate symptoms of dyspepsia, which is indigestion.
You think the
It would probably give you a heartburn. Or
right?
something.
You think the acid from the lemons would be worse, but I guess not.
Well, General Richard Taylor, son of President Zach, he wrote a passage in his war memoirs about Jackson eating lemons. Where Jackson got his lemons, no fellow could find out, but he was rarely without one.
Oh, good for him.
Right.
However, recent research by his biographer, James L. Robertson Jr., he found that none of Jackson's contemporaries, including members of his staff, friends, or his wife, recorded any unusual obsessions with lemons. Like, what are you talking about? Well, Jackson thought of a lemon as a rare treat, enjoyed greatly whenever it could be obtained from the enemy's camp. Jackson.
There's that one story, I think it was just before Chancellorsville. He went and met with he was at somebody's house and somebody's daughter, and they brought him a bunch of lemons, and he was like, oh, girl. That's probably where it comes from.
Right. Jackson was fond of all fruits.
That's people usually are.
Right. Particularly peaches.
That's a damn good fruit.
But he enjoyed with relish lemons, oranges, watermelons, apples, grapes, berries of all kinds, or whatever was available.
Hey, breaking Bolton, Stonewall Jackson was a normal human being.
Right.
Jeez.
Especially back then.
Right, what else you got to eat?
Right. You
Oh.
say bananas.
Right. Well, we know who eats bananas. You can't have doing that.
I like to have bananas back then.
Probably not.
As much, you know?
All right, because you definitely don't grow them in America.
Right. They came from
Southern
Africa.
America.
a banana tree in Africa.
I don't think so. I think it's mainly Southern America because it's wet.
Right. It's crazy.
Well, enough about those bananas. Let's take a look at old Jackson's religion.
Oh.
It's often been discussed, apparently. His biographer, Robert Louis Dabney, suggested it was the fear of God which made him so fearless of all else.
I mean, right.
Jackson himself had said, "My religious belief teaches me to feel as safe in battle as in bed."
Damn right.
Stephen Sears, he's a well-known guy, he states that Jackson was fanatical in his Presbyterian faith, and it energized his military thought and character. Theology was the only subject he genuinely enjoyed discussing. His dispatches invariably credited an ever-kind providence.
Oh, beautiful.
According to Sears as well, this fanatical religiosity had drawbacks. It warped Jackson's judgment of men, leading to poor appointments. It was said he preferred good Presbyterians to good soldiers. Oh. Yeah, you can't do that.
Right. Well, going back to James I. Robertson Jr., he suggests that Jackson was a Christian soldier in every sense of the word. According to Robertson, Jackson thought of the war as a religious crusade and viewed himself as an Old Testament warrior like David or Joshua, who went into battle to slay the Philistines. Jackson encouraged the Confederate States Army revival that occurred in 1863, although it was probably more of a grassroots movement than a top-down revival. Jackson strictly observed the Sunday Sabbath. James Robertson Jr. notes that no place existed in his Sunday schedule for labor, newspapers, or secular conversation.
Yeah, there's one. I think it was one of the. Obviously, it was one of the battles he wrote his wife. Remember where he was like, "I don't like to do battles on Sundays, but if I must,
right.
I hope it's for the best," or some shit like that. Yeah, he didn't even like to battle on Sundays.
No.
Well, take a look at his command style. In his command, he was extremely secretive about his plans and extremely meticulous about the military discipline. This secretive nature did not stand him in good stead with his subordinates.
Right.
And they were often not aware of his overall operational intentions until the last minute, and who complained of being left out of key decisions.
Right.
Robert E. Lee could trust Jackson with deliberately undetailed orders that conveyed Lee's overall objectives, what modern doctrine calls the end state.
Right. Lee's like, just tell him this and he'll figure it out.
Right.
Do you want anything? Come back? No, we got it, man. We'll.
Right, even if it wasn't clear.
Right.
Like, well, he'll get it.
Right. Well, this was because Jackson had a talent for understanding Lee's sometimes unstated goals. Lee trusted Jackson with the ability to take whatever actions were necessary to implement his end state requirements. Few of Lee's subsequent corps commanders had this ability. At Gettysburg, this resulted in lost opportunities because
You don't say.
they would have known. They would have been reading each other's minds. With a defeated and disorganized Union army trying to regroup on high ground near town, and they're very vulnerable, Lee sent one of his new corps commanders, Richard Ewell. He sent him discretionary orders that the Heights, which is Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill, be taken if practicable. Without Jackson's intuitive grasp of Lee's orders or the instinct to take advantage of sudden tactical opportunities, Ewell chose not to attempt the assault. And this failure is considered by historians to be the greatest missed opportunity of the battle. Yeah, if they would have got that, we're talking about a totally different war here.
Yeah, maybe. Well, even though old Fitzhugh said earlier that his horsemanship, I guess he said he almost was falling off of it, right, because Jackson had a poor reputation as a horseman. One of his soldiers, Georgia volunteer William Andrews, wrote that Jackson was a very ordinary-looking man of medium size, his uniform badly soiled as though it had seen hard service. Well, it had. He wore a cap pulled down nearly to his nose, and he was riding a raw-boned horse that did not look much like a charger, unless it would be on hay or clover. He certainly made a poor figure on a horseback, with his stirrup leather 6 inches too short, putting his knees nearly level with his horse's back. Oh, that's not good. And his heels turned out with his toes sticking behind the horse's foreshoulder.
Oh, wow.
A sorry description of one of our most famous generals, but a correct one.
Right. His horse, named Little Sorrel, also known as Old Sorrel, a small chestnut gelding, which was a captured Union horse from a Connecticut farm. He rode Little Sorrel throughout the war and was riding him when he was shot at Chancellorsville. Little Sorrel died at the age of 36. Damn, horses live that long?
Why not?
And is buried near a statue of Jackson on the parade grounds of VMI. His mounted hide is on display in the VMI Museum.
And they stuffed him.
Damn.
He was after the war, Jackson's wife and young daughter, Julia, they moved from Lexington to North Carolina. Mary Anna Jackson, she wrote 2 books about her husband's life.
She knew nothing about.
And she included some of his letters, right? She never remarried and was known as the widow of the Confederacy.
Damn.
Living until 1915, though.
Yeah.
His daughter, Julia, she married, bore children, but that old typhoid Mary, she came knocking at the door and took her at the age of 26.
Well, his legacy, let's take a look. Many theorists through the years have postulated that if Jackson had lived, Lee might have prevailed at Gettysburg.
What if?
Certainly, Jackson's discipline and tactical sense were sorely missed.
Sure were.
As a little boy,
Yeah, this guy.
General George Patton, great general of the World War II, prayed next to 2 portraits of Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson, who he assumed were God and Jesus.
Well, if we remember right, Patton's fam, they served for the Confederates. So.
Right. He once told Dwight Eisenhower, "I will be your Jackson."
I will be your Jackson. I will ride to battle with you. What's that song?
General Douglas MacArthur called Robert Eichelberger his Stonewall Jackson.
Awesome.
Chesty Puller idolized.
Wow, whatever you got that name. He's a chesty puller.
Oh, Chesty Puller idolized Jackson and carried George Henderson's biography of Jackson with him on all campaigns. Alexander Vandergrift, he also idolized Jackson. Cool. His last words, "Let us cross over the river and rest under the shade trees," were inspiration of the title of Ernest Hemingway's 1950 novel, Across the River and Into the Trees.
Grandmother's house, we go. All right, let's end it by looking at some of Jackson's descendants.
Oh, we got some?
Okay, of course. Well, Jackson's grandson and great-grandson, both namesakes, Thomas, Jonathan, Jackson, Christian, Henry Jinglesheimer Smith.
Right.
He lived from 1888 to 1952. And Thomas Jonathan Jackson Christian Jr., 1950 to 1944.
Youngins.
Yeah. Well, that guy was 60-something, but the other one was
Right,
30.
30.
Both graduated from West Point. The elder Christian was a career U.S. Army officer who served both World Wars, and he rose to the rank of Brigadier General.
Look at this guy.
Thomas Jonathan Jackson Christian's parents were William Edmund Christian and Julia Laura Christian. If he served in World War II and he was the son of Stonewall, why didn't he serve with old worship boy himself, Patton?
All right.
Maybe he did. I don't know. I'm assuming things.
Julia was the daughter of Stonewall and his wife, Mary Anna Morrison. The younger Christian was a colonel in command of the 361st Fighter Group, flying out of P-51 Mustangs in the European theater of operations in World War II. When he was murdered in action in August of 1944, his personal aircraft, Lou IV, was one of the most photographed P-51s in the war ever.
As an important element of the ideology of the Lost Cause, Jackson has been commemorated in numerous ways, including with statues, currency, and postage. A poem penned during the war soon became a poem penned during the war soon became a popular song. Stonewall Jackson's Way.
Oh,
The Stonewall Brigade Band. It's still active today.
I doubt that.
Well, obviously not with the same members. Demonetized.
Something like a fucking...
It's like a
ship.
a sea shanty,
Right.
but a battlefield shanty.
I like it.
West Virginia Stonewall Jackson State Park is named in his honor, clearly.
Obviously.
Nearby at Stonewall Jackson's historical childhood home.
Oh.
His uncle's grist mill is the centerpiece of a historical site at the Jackson's Mill Center for Lifelong Learning and State 4-H Camp.
The facility, located near Weston, serves as a special campus for West Virginia University and the West Virginia University Extension Service. During a training exercise in Virginia by the United States Marines in 1921, the Marine commander, General Smedley Butler,
Who names these guys? Dude?
General Smedley Butler, was told by a local farmer, he should be a baseball player.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
He was told by a local farmer that Stonewall Jackson's arm is buried nearby under a granite marker, to which Butler replied, "Bosh. I will take a squad of Marines and dig up the spot to prove you wrong."
Well, guess what he found?
Oh.
The arm in a box under the marker.
Damn right he did.
He later replaced the wooden box with a metal one. Good thinking.
Right.
And reburied it. Oh, it was just a skeleton arm. Photographed that shit, dude.
Right.
He left a plaque on the granite monument marking the burial place of Jackson's arm. The plaque is no longer on the marker, but can be viewed at the Chancellorsville Battlefield Visitor Center.
Why do they got to remove shit?
Right.
Leave it fucking there. Is it hurting anybody that there's a plaque sitting on the ground? Holy shit.
Well, settle down. Speaking of removed, we'll get to that in a second here, but beginning in 1904, the Commonwealth of Virginia celebrated Jackson's birthday as a state holiday. Yeah. Observance was eliminated with Election Day as replacement, effective July 2020, of course. Jackson is featured, like we've said already, in like 18 episodes on the 1925 Stone Mountain Memorial Half Dollar, which features his old buddy Lee and his old President Jefferson. And finally, a Stonewall Jackson monument was unveiled October 11th, 1919 in Richmond. Guess what? It was removed July 1st, 2020.
Yeah, I'm not too big on removing stuff, but I don't really think you need to have monuments and statues of people. But, I mean, I get it. I mean, without that statue there, like that plaque right there, with all the names and stuff, that would have been cool. But you don't need a damn statue of the dude on a horse.
Patton would approve because it's a little worshipy.
But,
yeah. Stonewall.
There he is. If it wasn't for ass South Carolinians.
North Carolinians, but
Were they North Carolinians?
Yes.
I think they're South
they were
Carolinians.
definitely North Carolinians.
I think they're South.
They were 100% North.
Are you sure?
Yes.
You're going to have to go back.
Don't have to because I know, but I will just to prove you wrong.
Oh! That was North Carolinians.
It was North Carolinians.
You bastards.
Yeah, that's Stonewall Jackson. Could have been a long career. This dude probably was. If he would have lived, he would have been a politician. And
Could have been president of the United States of America.
I don't know. Well,
The Confederate States of
I
America.
was going to say if the CSA existed, probably. Yeah, he would have took the path similar to Grant, probably.
Right.
But yeah, it's him. Probably one of the best generals in the Civil War, maybe of all time, if we're ranking them.
Right.
So just don't let him fall asleep with a biscuit in his mouth.
Right.
That's him. Next week we'll take a look at, I don't know.
We don't even know his beliefs. I guess we do know his beliefs and all that.
We looked at his slavery beliefs.
So he was more of he could have fought for the Union and been all right.
Yeah, so we never know. It's one of those what ifs of the battle and the country afterwards. What if he would have lived and went on to other things? But
What would have happened?
yeah, and that's him. Next week we'll take a look at either the Elmira prison, the POW camp that the Union ran, or we'll do another somebody. Who knows? But we'll be back nevertheless for Behind the Battles of the American Civil War. And so we'll see you then with the monthly music interview.